Got my little niece up here watching.
Warning. I'm just a backwoods redneck with a toolbox and a dream. I ain't no expert. So if you attempt scene in this video and something explodes, that's on you, buddy.
Okay, so here I am back at the shop. I decided to go ahead and yank out that distributor and the plug wires. As you can see, this thing is in dire need of some maintenance. So we're going to clean it up. Okay, I'm going to try to stay out of the way so y'all can see what's going on here. I'm probably going to end up reusing the cap and the rotor button because, like I said, it's pretty much new. I went ahead and marked number 1 just for reference as for when I put it back together. But I'm just going to, for the time being, I'm just going to get rid of this cap and these wires. As you can see inside there, the cap, it's in good condition. I mean, this thing practically has no miles on it, so lay that off to the side. And it actually looks like somebody has been in here and put new points in it before, and possibly a condenser. I want to give you a look at, I just took this advance plate out, the condenser, the points, basically almost, I got the vacuum advance off too, basically almost all the way tore down, and you see dirt that come out of that thing. But these are your advance weights inside here, and you have a heavy spring and a light spring, and a lot of people will commonly weld these slots up to limit how much advance the distributor actually has. But regardless of that, these weights should be at rest. They should be sitting at the inside of this, on the inside of these grooves. And you should be able to take 2 screwdrivers and pry these weights apart. And these are completely froze up. So I definitely think that is part of our performance issue and possibly part of that misfire that I was hearing. So I'm going to lube these up and see if we can get these freed up. All I'm going to do is squirt some PB Blaster down in here. We're going to clean all this up anyways. I'm just trying to see if I can get these freed up. Okay, I got this thing tore apart. Y'all, I'll give you a look at what's going on here. This thing has been neglected on service for a long time. And this is where most people would throw in the towel and buy a new distributor, but I'm determined to see if we can get this one to run any better than what it is, or did. I'm actually shocked that it run as good as it did, considering that the advance was completely locked up. This is just the empty housing. I'm going to go through and degrease this, clean it up, inspect that bushing inside there. That bronze bushing, it looks to be in okay shape. So set that to the side. All my reusable parts. Unfortunately, I did break the bottom bushing. I got a small block one here, I'll show you. The bushing on the bottom and the roll pin got destroyed in the disassembly part. But lucky for me, I got some parts distributors laying around, so I'll be stealing that off of that one. And the inside bushing that rides right here, it was already disintegrated. So I'll have to find me a replacement for that. So as you can see, without the top part of the distributor on, these weights move freely, as they should. But this shaft was so rusted up, with this piece sitting on there, it was just locked out. It was no advance to it at all. So, and it wasn't actually coming all the way back like it should. Under idle, or depending on what weight springs you got in here, under idle or low speeds, these things should be closed, and as RPM increases, they swing out. All that is determined by what size springs you have in here, but this thing was sitting halfway between those slots all the time, so it didn't have any advance to it at all. And I threw a timer light on it the other night, and I checked that. I can rev it up to about 3,500, and the timing stayed exactly where it was at. So I'm planning on ditching the heavy spring, so the timing advance comes in sooner. That way, as soon as you smack the throttle, it's right there. It should be right up on whatever you got your total timing set up to. So for now, I'm just gonna let these parts soak overnight, clean them up, and we'll start reassembling this thing tomorrow. I gotta track down a bushing. I don't know if I have one of these spare ones or not. Okay, now y'all, we got our distributor cleaned up, painted, looking nice. Got all that grease off there, and now we're ready to put this thing back together. I fully broke this thing all the way down, polished this shaft, cleaned all the internal pieces, the advance weights, the advance plate. Unfortunately, the vacuum advance is bad, so I'm gonna have to order one of those, but for the time being, we're just gonna put it back on there and cap it off. I had to get new bushings for the base of it and the advance plate bushing right there. So if you're curious about accidentally breaking one of these bushings, I'll give you a look at the part number here. Replace the base bushing. You can pick these up at Lowe's. And then this is the bushing that fits the advance weights. So if you break that bushing, don't worry about it because it's not a big deal. I cracked that one all to pieces. I got a new base gasket because this is not an O-ring distributor, so it has paper gasket. So we got a base gasket to replace it. Whoever owned the vehicle before me, looks like they put a new condenser in it, so we're going to stick with that one. They also look like they replaced the points, but I got a new set of points with brass contact, so we're going to go that route. Like I said, I just cleaned up everything, polished all the internal parts, so everything moves freely. Here's one thing you don't want to forget about. On this advance plate, if you look under here, there's, I can get this thing to rotate around, there's 3 brass contact points. You want to make sure those are clean and don't have any corrosion on them. I just took a piece of sandpaper I got stapled to the workbench here and lightly sanded those down. Nothing crazy. But you want to make sure those contact points are clean, and of course the underside of this plate needs to be clean as well. This whole thing was locked up, y'all. I mean, I can't believe it actually run as good as it did. So before I put it back together, I'm gonna give everything a quick little shot of 3-in-1 over here. We'll actually start putting this thing back together. Test fit everything to make sure everything is spinning freely. You can see that's much better than what it was. So I don't want to forget you. There's 2 washers that go on the bottom of this shaft here. One for the inside and one for the outside. So it's not riding against that aluminum or that bronze bushing inside the distributor. So there's one washer that goes on the inside before the shaft actually goes in. Wouldn't hurt to put a drop of oil on that too. That's what ultimately led to this thing locking up, is it was missing the little felt piece that sits on top of this shaft, and you're supposed to periodically drop a couple of drops of oil on that felt piece, but it was completely missing, so there was no way for that thing to slowly deliver oil down to the advanced weights or anything, and eventually it just got plumb locked up. I'll put this base one on next. We'll go ahead and put our new bushing on here. That'll hold everything in place for us. In case you're wondering, I drilled this out with a 7/64 drill bit for the new bushing. 7/64 drill bit, and it'll retain the factory roll pin. Okay, so I had to step that drill bit up to a 9/64 to get that bushing to fit the roll pin, but we got it in there now, and we're gonna move on with the assembly process. So we got both our washers on the top and bottom, and let's see what am I looking for. The weights. Here we go. This was the main issue of this distributor, was the advanced weights were frozen completely up. But as you can see now, of course that one doesn't have a spring on it. They swing freely, so I'm not going to run the heavy spring. I'm going to go ahead and remove the heavy spring from this weight. So hopefully the advance comes in a little bit sooner, which it should. A little side note was, I went in here and polished the inside of these advance weights with a small wire brush just to get the corrosion off of them. That way they swing freely. I also took a wire wheel to all the internal parts to clean off any rust or corrosion. So now, without any oil, you can see how free that moves. It's way better than, I mean, that's a night and day difference than what it was. So, with that, I'm going to drop this weight on. Grab my pliers here. And try to finagle this spring back on. This is the light spring, so it shouldn't be that hard to get it to go back into place. The light spring is installed, and we'll drop the bushing in, the new bushing for the advanced weights. All this does is keep the advanced plate from riding on top of the weights. So it just sits in between the weights, and it keeps this piece from weighing down on top of the weights, if that makes any sense. So what I'm going to do is drop a few drops of oil in here. Doesn't take much. Oil inside that bushing. And drop the advance plate back on. All that does is hold the advance plate down. It's just a little spring clip inside there. I don't know if you can see it or not. So now we ready to throw this plate in. Like I said, I cleaned all the contact points on this to make sure everything's going to have a good connection. And let's make sure we line this up the correct way. If you notice, I removed the factory wire that goes from the points to the coil. I'm going to keep that just in case we have issues, but it felt kind of weak at this point right here where it passes through the distributor body. So what I did was just replace that with a O-ring, and I'm going to run my own wire. That fits that O-ring perfectly. So that wire just feels a little weak, the part that passes through the distributor, so I'm gonna keep it just to have it on hand, but I'm gonna run our own wire for the time being. So let me grab our new points. With that being said, I went ahead and wired up our new coil wire to our points and installed our condenser on there. So now all we got to do is drop these in the distributor itself and tighten down the condenser, hold down screw, and then we'll adjust our points. First, I'm going to start off by feeding this wire through this rubber grommet. I left myself some extra. I measured it beforehand, but I always like to leave a little extra wire. And using this grommet's nice because it keeps the wire from getting chafed on the aluminum body of the distributor, and it's just about weather tight. The factory connection was weather tight, but like I said, it had a little weak spot where it passes through the distributor body. So to eliminate any headache, I just opted to run a new wire. Now, as you can see, the points just set down on top of that pivot pin, and we'll put our adjustment screw in that hole, and then we have a tiny screw to hold down the condenser down here. I don't know if you'll be able to see this from up there or not. One thing I like to do is make sure that you're giving the wire enough slack to have a slight bit of movement as the advance comes in, because this whole entire plate right here will move, and it'll move even farther if you got your vacuum advance hooked up. So just be sure to keep enough slack tucked in there. That should be a plenty right there. Actually, I'll probably put a little bit of a bend on this to keep it from interfering with the advance. And now we're going to set our points, and all you do is basically bring that purple rubbing block up on the high spot of one of these cam lobes here, and you want to stick your feeler gauge in between these points, contact points here. And on Mopars, they're spec'd out to in between 15 and 17 thousandths. So we're going to go with 17 thousandths on this. That'll give us some adjustment as that rubbing block wears down, because that purple block, over time, as this distributor spins back and forth, it'll eventually wear down, and you'll have to tighten up the gap on these points. So we're going to set them at the widest spec first, and all you do is come in here, stick your feeler gauge in between these contact points. That's a 17 thousandths feeler gauge, and then you want to bring that rubbing block up on one of the cam lobes at the highest point and tighten down your set screw, which is not in there right now, but it goes right there. Tighten down your set screw and you should be good to go. Now I'll give y'all a look close up at what it looks like now. That screw's seen better days, but working with what we got here. And you'll notice as that cam comes around and hits that rubbing block, the two contact points separate, and that's what generates your spark. Well, that's what collapses the magnetic field and sends the signal to the coil to release its charge. And there's 8 lobes on that cam for 8 cylinder. 6 cylinder be 6 lobes on that cam. So that's pretty much the basic rebuild of it, y'all. I mean, we pretty much turned a junk piece of trash, something that looked like that, into a nice factory stage 1, I would call it, performance piece. One little upgrade I almost forgot to show you is ran a piece of safety wire through that hole and through the clip itself. And I'll come in through here with some side cutters and cut that off really close. But that's just another small little detail, y'all, that'll help you for my headache down the road. I've seen that on somebody else's YouTube channel. I'm not sure where I got that from. I've seen people put small screws and nuts through here, but during engine vibration and stuff, I'm worried that the screws will probably fall out. That's just a small little detail. Like I said, I picked it up from another channel on YouTube. If I figure out what video it was, I'll tag it in a minute. Nice little trick though. All this is just some safety wire. I keep some of this in my carburetor box to run through jets and passages, clean up block vacuum ports or anything like that. Doesn't take much, just a small little piece. You're going to trim most of it off anyways. Because I had been fighting this issue with this particular distributor, trying to work on it in the car, and the springs keep falling out of it. So if you lay it over sideways, that clip wants to fall out now. There we go. Got it cut off flush. Doesn't take much to hold it in there. All about the details, y'all, when you're working on a tight budget. When you're trying to get some performance out of your factory parts. There we go. Now we can head over to the car and get some measurements for the plug wires.